Welcome. If it's the first time viewing a video, this is Woodworks USA. My name is Scott. About 2 years ago, I designed and built a Workbench to basically get all my tools in a consolidated area that I could easily, plug into power and start working on stuff. Over the last couple of years, I have learned a lot using this thing and basically compiled all my ideas and created basically version 2, much more involved, much more intricate workbench. And today I'm going to discuss kind of the pluses and minuses of each and the reasons why I like some function of one versus the other. And yeah, should be a good video. So the first thing is actually the weight. And even though the DeWalt bench is 2 feet larger, a little bit taller, it's actually significantly lighter than the Milwaukee bench, just because there's a lot more going on with this thing. It's a lot heavier. So working, every weekend with kind of you going back and forth between each one, got to give the tip to the DeWalt one. I don't know the exact weight on each, but I think this one fully loaded as is, it's probably between 600 and 800 pounds, whereas this one's probably more in the 1,000 to 1,200 pound range. Still, both of them are still easily movable, but if you're to pick one from a weight perspective, just moving it around every day, this one's certainly easier to move around. So the next topic is just overall storage. The DeWalt bench, obviously we said before, is a lot larger, 2 feet longer, but I'll have to give it to the storage I implemented in the Milwaukee Workbench. Reason being, I do a lot of projects away from my house, so I need to gather my tools. And that was one of the things I had wanted to change going from this one to this one, is the ability to take stuff with you if you're going on kind of mobile work. So whereas, this version, I'd have to kind of get a bag or load up tool by tool into the truck. The Milwaukee one's based on the pack out system. So if you need your drills, all you need to do is grab your drill box, got your drill bits in there, got everything, your driver bits in there. It's already all ready to go. So it's a lot faster to kind of just take your stuff with you if you're doing that all the time. Now, if you're not ever going anywhere, I'd give the tip to the DeWalt one, because all of your tools are readily available and accessible a lot quicker than this one. Like if I want to drill, I have to open a drawer, open the pack out, grab the drill. So there is a trade-off here, a little bit, access is a little bit different, but I'd still give the nod to the Milwaukee bench. Talk about miter saw functionality. While I do actually prefer the actual saw of the DeWalt saw versus the Milwaukee saw, couple different reasons. Just feels a bit more solid to me in hand. I like the bearings a bit more. It's a bit smoother. It's a great saw, but this one I think is a couple $100 less expensive. It is obviously corded versus battery powered. So if you're wanting to be battery powered, obviously that's a great option. But as far as function of the saw within the bench, this one has a couple drawbacks. Obviously the major one is this stop system that I use, this Craig version, needs to be up above the bench, so you lose a lot of your flat surface. I wasn't able to implement a stop on the left side, which I'm right-handed, so normally I would be, either positioning the wood with my left hand, sawing with my right hand. Well, kind of working backwards with this system, whereas it's on the right-hand side. Still extremely accurate, so I can't fault it there, but I only get 55 to 9-inch cuts, whereas this system, completely different ball game. I have 8 feet to the left of the blade, another 6 feet to the right of the blade of precision track inlaid into the top. So the functionality of the miter saw station as a whole is far superior on the Milwaukee Workbench than the DeWalt setup. Table saw function, definitely give the nod to the Milwaukee style bench versus this guy. The movability of the saw being on linear rails with the actuator is far superior to this setup. You can get full 48-inch width to the miter saw interference, which is super convenient for, you know, ripping plywood sheets. This one still works if you're only ripping 16 inches or more off of a 48-inch sheet. This works perfect. Doesn't work for all the different scenarios you might be encountering, which is kind of why I went with this design. The other thing I didn't do was I didn't put slots in for miter gauges in this one. I never ended up using it really. I was planning on doing a lot more precision work with this workbench, so did put in those miter slots, various widths, so you can use the saw in different positions along the width of it. Again, I'm using battery powered table saw in this one, corded in this one, so you have to make sure if you're building this one on a corded platform that you do use at least a 20 amp circuit, 20 amp rated power strip, and probably a dedicated 20 amp outlet in your garage as well. Whereas, you know, this one is all battery powered, so really all you're powering is the vacuum and the charger, which is super nice. Unless you're using the router, of course, then you're kind of running that as well as the vacuum. But again, table saw function for sure, giving the nod to the Milwaukee setup. So for overall footprint, obviously I believe this one has the advantage being slightly smaller, plus the fact that it has a completely flat worktop other than the saw here. There's no other obstructions and everything's all basically level with the worktop. One of the reasons I was able to get away with that was using 80/20 system for all my flip up extensions. So you have really solid foundations for a bunch of different things to work on. So obviously I have this pack out mounted one for my pocket hole setup, one on either end for the miter saw track, and then obviously the table saw outfeed one that I doubled up as my T-track assembly table as well. Just the amount of, I guess, forethought and planning that went into this one was far superior to that iteration. Obviously I had 2 years to play around with that one and see what I liked and didn't like, but that one's just a simple wood frame, kind of flimsy-ish, that I never really liked, but certainly gets the job done for serving as an outfeed table. And I do most of my assembly work on that little flip up as well. So the main advantage there would be cost. I believe I had mostly leftover wood, made a flip up extension, just needed some hinges, and I put in some actuators on that one as well, just to make it easy to raise and lower. Whereas most of the cost associated with this workbench is in that aluminum rail system to make all these flip ups work. So as the woodworking I was doing was kind of changing, going from more homeowner renovation type framing stuff to more intricate project based, if you will, the main thing I wanted to change was the router functionality. I never really even used the skill router table setup, only on a couple things, but this is a completely different league, using the woodpecker's inlaid table, the fence track with their whole super fence system. You just can't even compare them really, but obviously the nod goes to this bench. From a dust collection perspective, I'm truly torn because both of them have such strong positives that the negatives they have kind of are totally overshadowed. So the main positives of this one are all the valves are in the same spot, which is actually kind of convenient, because what inevitably happens is you're working with the table saw or the miter saw or whatever you're doing, and you leave the wrong valve open because you're going back and forth or doing your normal work. So you come over here, close one, open the other one, no big deal. The Milwaukee bench has the valve situated next to each tool, which again is super convenient. If I'm using the table saw, the valve for that one's right there. Problem is, you still leave the miter saw one open, so you inevitably have to go around, close that one, and come back. I will say it is nice having them all together versus kind of spread all about. The second nod I will give the DeWalt bench is the way I structured the wiring. The vacuum turns on and off of a master power strip that's inside the table that all the tools are plugged into, and then it's plugged into the power port of the vacuum. So whenever you turn on a tool, whether it's the table saw, miter saw, router, the planer, they're all hooked up into that power strip, so the vacuum kicks on as soon as you start the tool. Likewise, when you turn the tool off, the vacuum stops. Since the Milwaukee one's all electric, or sorry, battery powered, you have to turn it on and off with the switches, which is fine, but again, you know, after using this for 2 years and it auto turning off, I find myself leaving the vacuum on that one all the time just because I forget to turn it off, or likewise forget to turn it on as well. So from a serviceability perspective, as far as getting to the vacuum, emptying the drum, I'd give a slight nod to the Milwaukee setup. It did put the vacuum on a slider so you can get to it to change and service the filters if you want to. It's connected to it so it can't move around or anything. The drum and dust separator is a little bit smaller on this one just for fitting everything in here. So you do have to change it a little more often, but is a little bit easier to get to on this version versus the other one. So the big automatic win for the DeWalt bench is the planer. Obviously the other one doesn't have a planer, so kind of give the nod to this one by default. This is super nice to have. One thing that I would change if I were to do this again, and a lot of people who have actually built this bench have sent me pictures, they've actually put this on the same slider but rotated it 90 degrees so they can feed the wood lengthwise out here along the base versus having to feed through and then either have a partner on the other side to catch it or travel around and grab your wood out of the other side. So that's a great tip from a few people that have actually positioned this 90 degrees clockwise. So one other consideration is the material for the worktop. So I use melamine on the original one. Main reason I wanted to do this was have a slight bit of just protection from glue up work. With the 90 frame, I was doing a lot of frames at the time, and it is nice to be able to scrape the glue off. This one is just regular MDF coated with just an insane amount of Danish oil coats. I think like over 12 Danish oil coats. And it has been good. It's obviously repairable. If you do make any kind of big damage, you can always sand it smooth and recoat it. Actually, I had to do that once. I made the mistake of leaving a drink on top of it that had some sweat, left a ring, was able to sand it down, clean it up, and good as new. You don't have that problem with the melamine, obviously. It's a little rough around the edges, you get chips and stuff, but it's not a big deal. Overall, I think I like the melamine a little bit more. I think the MDF probably looks a little better, but from a performance perspective, I'd give the nod to the DeWalt bench. So both of these have pocket hole functionality, kind of built in, integrated, if you will. This one has the pocket hole jig on a pack out plate that I can take on and off of this flip up and then store it down below. The DeWalt bench has the Craig setup just bolted straight to the tabletop, so you lose a little bit of kind of the flat table. But from a function perspective, this setup is much better. Both tables, you have the ability to run the auxiliary vacuum to clean up, so that's super convenient as well. but I definitely give a nod to this setup here. So the big question here is, which one is the best? I definitely have to give the nod to this one. Just the function, the precision, all the different features it has, it's just far superior, but it comes at a price. This workbench is approximately, sitting here as is, approximately 4 times the cost of this one. Just the 80/20 functionality, the tools themselves, all of the track, just it all adds up, especially when you consider the tools in it as well. All the woodpecker's goodies I have in this thing obviously add up. This is by no means a slouch. It's a great workbench if you're needing something that facilitates all the tools that it has. There's a lot of function here that served me well for 2 years. I built this one using this one so it can produce nice things. After thinking about it for 2 years on what I would do different, this is what I came up with. So happy to have this. This one will be moving on to its new home. If you like the content I produce, please consider subscribing. Also, if you would like to hear any more information or have any questions, please drop me a comment. I'd be happy to answer your questions.